We'd like to welcome you to our monthly Lunch and Learn meetings. My name is Jan Davies. I'm from Friendswood ISD, and I'm joined with by Terry Stokes from Galveston ISD, and we are hosting this meeting today. We're so excited to welcome back Allison Schaberg from Consolidated Planning Group. We're so thankful for our relationship with her and the knowledge that she brings to our districts. And thank you, Allison, for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me back. I am happy to be here with you, and happy Friday, everyone. We were just talking a moment ago that everything's better on Friday, isn't it? So we're glad that you are here with us today. As she said, Allison Schaberg, Consolidated Planning Group. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm, but I come to you as a mom. A mom of 4 and 2 with special needs. I have one that is in the midst of transitioning and one that has already transitioned. And what I would say is that the journey is tough. It's not always easy. There's a lot of things as parents that we need to know and how to navigate some of these waters, and some of these waters that have been, you know, as calm as to be expected, right? You know, through the growing up years, everything changes when our kids turn 18. So we have a YouTube channel. We put out a lot of educational events as it relates to special needs planning, things that are related, whether it's guardianship, special needs trust, SSI, Medicaid, all types of different topics, ABLE accounts, etc. So at the end of this presentation today, there will be a link for our YouTube channel. Today's meeting is being recorded. We do not see you and we cannot hear you, so we don't see your cameras, but we know you're there, and we're glad that you're here today. And we want to answer as many questions as we can. So as we're going through this presentation, we do want it to be interactive. You can put your questions in the chat box, and we're going to get to as many as possible. This meeting is scheduled from 12 to 1 today, so we plan for it to be over at 1 if you're planning your lunch hour. So welcome again. We're glad you're here. So today, what we're talking about is Medicaid waivers, SSI eligibility, and preserving benefits. And this is one of those things I like to call the waivers and the interest lists and things like that buzzwords. It's something as parents in special needs community, whether you work in the school, you have a special needs child, or what have you, this is something that we hear over and over and over again is about the Medicaid waivers. And also they refer to it as, you know, asking if your child is on the interest list. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to talk through some other matters along the way as we're talking about this. Okay, so just in getting started, Texas Medicaid home and community-based waivers. There's a number of waivers out there, and some of them you've heard of, some of them you may not have heard of. So we've got the class waiver, which is community living assistance and support services. This is a mouthful. I always mess this one up. The DBMD, deaf, blind with multiple disabilities. So that is in fact deaf and blind with multiple disabilities. We've got home and community-based services, HCS. We have the Texas Home Living, the MDCP, the Star Plus waiver, the YES waiver, the Youth Empowerment Services, and then Community First Choice. So there's a number of waivers out there. And one thing that we know as parents, maybe a lot of you aren't on any of the waivers yet, but maybe you're on the interest list. So first things first, it is important that you do get yourself on the interest list. The waiting list, I think it's anybody's guess. You know, the waiting list was actually frozen for a couple of years, and it's moving again. But the timeline for services and actually getting a waiver, more recently I've heard could be as much as 17 years, maybe 15. I've heard a little bit more. I've heard a little bit less. So if you are actually already getting one of these waivers, consider yourself lucky. And we're going to kind of talk about some of the reasons why a person would qualify for a waiver. But these waivers are basically designed to waive off some cost of care and other things to avoid residential placement is the premise behind most of these waivers, that home and community-based services are going to be better for your loved one that needs services. And so that's the why behind it. Okay, so getting started, we're going to talk about the community living, the class waiver. This is going to be a home and community-based supports to children and adults with related conditions. There are over 200 related conditions like cerebral palsy, spina bifida. The related conditions must have occurred before the child was 22. So for the most part, eligibility for these waivers, and we'll talk about that a little bit further, it is, most of the premise behind it is for individuals that have an intellectual disability, which is determined by an IQ of 70 and below, or 75 and below with multiple disabilities. So we've got the deaf blind with multiple disabilities. This gives services for children and adults who are deaf blind or have a related condition that leads to deafness or blindness, and they also have another disability. We've got the HCS. It's more commonly, it stands for Home and Community-Based Services, and this gives services and supports to children and adults with an intellectual disability or related condition who live with their families in their own homes or in small group homes with no more than 4 people. Okay. So we've got several of them on here. We've got the MDCP. Sometimes we see families that do have MDCP. This gives services to children and adults who are 20 and younger who are medically fragile as an alternative to receiving services in a nursing facility. We have the STAR Plus Home and Community-Based Waiver, and this gives services to adults over the age of 21 to keep them in their community and not in a nursing home. And then as far as Texas Home Living, this is service to children and adults with an intellectual disability or a related condition who live in their own home or their family's home. The different waivers out there have different amounts of money tied to them, like the total amount of services or money that would be applied to it. So that's why, whether you have the class waiver, the Texas Home Living, or the HCS, or we see those a lot, the common ones, depends on the total value of the waiver itself. The Youth Empowerment Service waiver, this is one that actually doesn't really have a waiting list, and so I like to spend time talking about this. This is a wraparound program, so Youth Empowerment Services, yes, waiver. It's a wraparound program for children under the age of 19 with serious mental, emotional, and behavioral difficulties. And so basically with this one, think about all of the alphabet soup, the initials, the diagnoses that some of our family members have. It might be ADHD, ODD, BPD, bipolar, anxiety, depression. Some of the other ones where it might be a good fit for the yes waiver, kids that have had run-ins with the law, kids that have been runaways, or maybe have had, aggressive outbursts where they have physically harmed somebody if they've been a threat to themselves or others. So I talk about this one because, the mental health and the mental well-being of many has been struggling since the pandemic has been going on. And as I mentioned, this is one waiver that there's not a waiting list for. So the services that they provide are pretty awesome. And you can go, you can just Google the yes waiver, and you're going to contact your county local intellectual disability authority to do an intake if you're interested in this. Now, one thing that I want to be clear on, so if you have a child with a disability and most of their disability is kind of a mental health disability, then, this is a good fit. But if you have a child that basically their other disabilities far outweigh any of the mental health, they're not a good fit for this. So if they're extremely low functioning, autism, or really on the IDD side, and there's aggression related to some of the other diagnoses that you have, then this might not be a good fit. But it doesn't cost you anything but your time to do an intake, and it might work for you. So the community first choice, this is one of the newer ones that we see. This allows states to provide home and community-based attendance services and supports to Medicaid recipients with disabilities. They help with activities of daily living, health-related tasks, hands-on assistance, supervision, and then basic services to help others learn how to care for themselves. So when we start talking about waiver general eligibility, so again, most waivers are for all ages for the exception of MDCP and STAR Plus. And typically the financial eligibility for all waivers, except for the Texas Home Living, is within 300% of SSI, which for 2021, that number is 2313. And the key thing to understand and know is this does not look at parental income. So that is a big thing. So, and eligibility starts when the person comes to the top of the wait list. So one could argue with as long as Texas's, wait list is that if you have a child, you should automatically put them on the waiver list when they're born, because you never know when you're going to need services. Don't wait to put your child on the interest list. Like some families say, well, my child isn't IDD, their IQ is 85, so maybe I wouldn't qualify for these waivers. Anything can change along the way. Any health-related thing can change. Those IQ numbers might change, and you might need this waiver in the future. But the key thing is you don't have to prove eligibility to get yourself on the list. Eligibility is determined at the time that you're at the top. And so the individuals must also meet the functional eligibility criteria for the specific waiver, and they also have to stay Medicaid qualified.
We have a couple questions.
Yes.
So
Sure.
First of all, they want to know how to get on the interest list.
Yes, and I'm gonna have some slides for that, and after this meeting, later today or tomorrow, you'll get an email, and we'll go ahead and put the slides in a PDF that have the contact information on how to get on those lists and where you go for that.
Okay, so then another question is, if you're on one interest list and not another, should one be on all the lists? And how do you become Medicaid qualified? What do you do if you're not qualified for Medicaid?
So yeah, we're going to hit on those, and the key is, yes, you do want to be on all of the interest lists, and some people think they're on all the interest lists, but they're actually not. So we're going to talk about that and how you make sure that you actually do get on all of them. So there's two funding paths for waivers. There's a first come, first serve statewide, and it says, the wait can be as long as 14 years. Like I said, I've recently heard as long as 17. Who even knows? I don't know if anybody knows. But it also, so we're preventing or diverting individuals from institution, okay? These waivers also address crisis, and I'm going to talk about some of the crisis slots that might be available. And so it also helps individual move or transition from institutions as well. Okay. So the wait list, how do you get on the wait list? So the MDCP Class DBMD, there is a specific phone number right there on the screen that you get yourself on the wait list for that, okay? The HCS, Texas Home Living, and the Community First Choice, you're going to, contact your local intellectual developmental disability authority, whether you call it a LIDA or a LIDA, I'm not really sure. But you're going to contact your local one. It's by county to get yourself on the list. And we've got those county numbers on this presentation, so we're going to share that with you as well. And then, of course, we have the STAR Plus, and there's an 800 number for the STAR Plus. But a lot of times the mistakes that people make are that they think that if they call their local authority and ask to be put on the list, that they're automatically put on all the lists, but they're only put on these three lists, the HCS, Texas Home Living, and CHFC, and they're missing these other ones, the class or the STAR Plus, et cetera. So, so definitely make a note that you want to check. If you already are on the list, I suggest checking probably, once every year and every 2 years for sure, to make sure and find out where you are on the list. The local authorities are typically supposed to reach out to you every 2 years and just verify that you still want to be on the list. Some counties do, some counties don't. Some counties have been a little bit more behind than others. So do make sure that you do your part to reach out. Do we have some additional questions, Jan?
Yes, they're just asking if the slides will be available and the recording will be available after the show. Or the
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
For sure. Okay, so let's talk about crisis diversion. So when we talk about these long waiting lists, it doesn't sound very encouraging that we're ever going to get help anytime soon. But there is a such thing as a crisis diversion slot. So basically, if you or your loved one is in crisis, you can contact your local authority and tell them you would like to request an HCS, crisis diversion waiver. And so your first stop is your local intellectual disability authority. But let's talk about what a crisis is, because all people can say we're in crisis and they're really not. So one example of a crisis is a family who maybe one of the caregivers was diagnosed with something horrible, heart attack, stroke, cancer, that is going to limit the ability of their caregiving services for their loved one with a disability. And as a result, the child is at risk of being placed outside of the home. Another example of a crisis diversion slot is the individual with a disability has become a threat to themselves or others and family members, extremely angry, aggressive, some of the other things, you know, that you see, and again that the child is at risk of being placed outside of the home. I've also seen some crisis diversion slots that were well needed, where we had a grandfather who had guardianship of his special needs grandson. And well, the truth is everybody grows up, the grandson and grandpa is 80 years old and he's not as nimble as he used to be. And he doesn't have the strength, endurance, or health to continue caring for his grandson. So that's an example of a crisis diversion. But just calling up and saying you need a crisis diversion, you're not going to get one. Okay, so your first stop is your local intellectual disability authority. Another place, if you fall into this category where you might be a candidate or your loved one might be a candidate for a crisis diversion slot, there is an organization out of Austin, and they have liaisons out of the greater Houston area that serve, you know, Galveston area, all of that. But it's called Every Child. Okay, so again, the name of it is Every Child. They are out of Austin, and so if you are trying to get a crisis diversion slot and you're hitting a brick wall, you feel like you're banging your head against the wall with your local authority, which sometimes is the case, sometimes it's not, you still have a backup plan in calling Every Child. So that is another backup plan. And then, of course, you can certainly call us, and we definitely have attorneys that can help streamline that process. If you're not getting the help that you need on a free basis, we can help with that. Okay, so we have the PASRR, diversion and transition from nursing facilities and our specialized services. Looks like we have some more questions. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going for now. Here are some of the agencies that serve Pearland and Friendswood. So we've been talking about the local intellectual developmental disability authority. That's where you get yourself on the list there. That's at the bottom. So we've got Health and Human Services, HHS, Aging and Disability Resources, the Area Agency on Aging. So, you know, granted, you know, we're here, we're talking about our kids, maybe our kids are transitioning or whatever, but some of us have aging parents as well. There are services as it relates to that as well. Okay, here's some agencies that serve the Houston area. So, you know what, I'm going to go back just for a second. Yeah, it is the Gulf Coast Center. I actually did see a message in the chat box were we referring to the Gulf Coast Center? So that is right for your local authority. And then Harris is the Harris Center. And if you are on with Harris County or whatever, you may have heard of this before, of MHMRA. A lot of people in the area, it was called MHMRA forever. And so a lot of people still refer to it as that, but it is referred to as the Harris Center now. These local authorities also have some assessments and testing and different things that they can do. So they'll do an intake. They'll bring your loved one into their system. You may already be in their system, but they also have some assessments that they can do that will determine the level of need for care for your loved one, and they have a rating system for that. So if you don't know the level of need of care for your loved one, I mean, I know that you know it like from a day-to-day basis, but like per their numbered system, then I would suggest that you go ahead and get that ball moving. And again, if you're transitioning, if you're, in that zone of transitioning with your loved one, it doesn't hurt to get the ball rolling with this. So that way we know we have this. They're going to do that IQ testing. I talk to people all the time and I ask them, what is your son's IQ? And they don't know. And they know that they have intellectual disabilities, but they don't know the score, and the score matters on some of this kind of stuff. So this is Houston, and then here we've got Fort Bend County. So your local authority here at Fort Bend County is going to be Texana Center. So again, your local authority is where you're going to call. You're going to get yourself on the list. That's for those 3 waivers, and then there's the special phone number for class for the MDCP class and the deaf blind with multiple disabilities. Jan, how are we on questions? Do you want to bring some questions up?
We're okay. I've been trying to answer a lot of them as we go along. They're asked if they live in a different area, does it still apply? So yes, it does. Like Sugar Land instead of Friendswood. And what does a waiver do for your loved one is one of the questions.
Yes, that's a good question. So again, all of these services are by county. So every county has a local authority that they deal with. So if you're in a different county, then if you're not in Galveston County and you're in Fort Bend, then this is going to be your authority. So these waivers, it depends on which waiver you get, but they will, and it depends on the level of need for care for your loved ones. What can they do by themselves? What do they need help doing? And they get attendant hours, where you have hours and care, where you have caregivers that come in that help in the caregiving responsibilities. It will pay for outside services and therapies and things like that. It might do art therapy. It could do equine therapy, music therapy, all different kinds of therapy that some of these waivers will cover as well. But the main thing is that level of need needs to be determined, because that level of need is going to determine how many attendant hours that you get. And depending on the waiver and the richness of the particular waiver will also depend on how many attendant hours you get. So some waivers have more attendant hours than others.
Another question is, how often should you get an IQ score?
Well, I think if there's been major changes, like, I think I had my kids done when they were small, and I recently just had them done again this year. And they're usually a small variance, give or take a little bit. But if you're on the line of IDD or not on the line, if you're on the line, then you might want to get it. You might want to get an updated one, because it can change. One of the things that we've seen is with adolescents, young adults, 18 to 22, 18 to 24, on the autism spectrum, there's a higher prevalence, and I'm not saying this is going to happen by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a higher prevalence with mental illness and schizophrenia. Those diagnoses are on the rise, combined with autism and that age group. And so we actually have seen people that had an IQ above 70 be below 70. Of course, there could be any accidents or injuries or other things like that would change that number, but it does and it can move.
Okay, another question is, I live in the boundary between two counties, but zoned for Harris County. Does it make a difference in terms of quality of care, whether I live in Galveston or Harris County? Would it?
That I would say, because some things are not created equally, and that I would say is to, I would chat with some of the parents in both the counties. All things are not created equally. Some local offices are better than others, and I talk about that with the Social Security Administration offices that are around the state. They're not all created equally. Some are really, really wonderful, and others I wish they would just close. They're so horrible. But I think, if you're in Harris County, then you belong with the Harris County one. You've got to be in the county that you live.
And they're asking, another question is, does anything change in terms of a waitlist waiver after my child turns 18?
So no, no, you just want to get them on sooner versus later. I mean, again, I say it's not about looking back. So if you're on here today and your child isn't on the wait list because you didn't know about it, first I want to say that you're not alone. But just fix it. Just get them on. Just get them on the list, because what we hate to see is that somebody's getting on the list at 25 or 26, and they needed services 10 years ago, right? Because the wait list is so long. You want to have options and choices, and this is going to defray some of the costs. As parents, we've always covered these costs. We've covered the cost of care. We've covered the cost of services. Therapies may be coupled by some of our insurance, but we still had a lot of out-of-pocket costs related, to the care of our loved ones. So if this can defray some of that cost, it will help. And of course we do the full range planning, special care planning, that kind of thing. Anywhere where you can save is going to help your overall retirement. and we've got kids that have needs that are going to need care for the rest of their life. So when it comes to planning, special care planning, future care cost estimates, and things like that, all of those things are really important, because it's really important that we have enough money that we can spend 25 to 35 years in retirement, but that we also have enough, like in a pool of money for our loved ones that may outlive us 20 to 25 to 35 years. So that's really important.
Okay, and where would they go for an IQ test?
Okay, so that was one thing I was going to, put towards you. I don't know if the schools do it. I mean, I know that, when it comes to testing and, DIAG and things like that, I mean, they do a lot of different testing, but I'm not sure that the schools specifically do the IQ testing. But again, your local intellectual disability authority does do IQ testing, and that level of need and all that kind of stuff would be done there. Another way that you can go about doing it is that you can get neuropsych testing done. There's various places all across the state, but basically any place that does the disability, the intellectual disability, learning disability testing and things like that, they can do that. And that would be paid for, and you would pay for that out of your pocket. And it can be pretty expensive, $3,500 to $5,000. What we've seen is that the timeline of getting this scheduled, the turnaround time, it's long. So as I mentioned, the demise of the mental health with the COVID pandemic, it's real. And maybe you've seen this, where you've called a psychiatrist or a psychologist to get your child scheduled with them. And they said, we're not taking new patients, or we have a 6-month waiting list. I've heard of even as long as a 1-year waiting list. So that can be problematic. So you want to start early. But another thing that I want to tell you, and we do have YouTube videos on this on vocational rehab. And I know that both the ladies on with me today are pretty well versed in this. But pre-ETS, vocational rehab, the summer earn and learn program, if your kids are involved with VR, the vocational rehab program through the Texas Workforce Commission, if they're not involved and you don't know what this is, you should check it out. And your school has a liaison that can work with you, but it's about really, giving the kids tools and resources that they need to become employable, like, gainful employment, not just underemployment. But the VR program, they have big budgets. They have state and federal funds that they have to distribute. And part of, assessing and putting a plan together, the vocational rehab plan together, they do assessments. So it's very possible you don't call them up and say, yes, I want this assessment. I want you to do this for me. Allison at Consolidated Planning Group said it's going to be free. But part of their program is doing these assessments to find out where your child is. So they, for my kids, they did the neuropsych testing. They did a vocational evaluation, and they were very thorough. They were very, very comprehensive, and they used outside vendors who they have a relationship with, which was awesome, because the waiting list that I was talking about of how long it takes to get in with some of these places to do this yourself and pay for it yourself didn't exist. We were able to get in right away, and 100% of the cost of that was covered through vocational rehab. So those are some ways around it, around out of pocketing, $3,000 to $5,000. Jan, do you know if the schools do the IQ testing?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Okay. So there you have it. So your free and public education. So if a family doesn't have this and they need this, how do they go about that? Do they just put it in writing and request an updated IQ, or how does that work? Do you know?
Yes, that's what they would put it in writing, request it, and send it to their school psychologist, LSSP, the DIAG. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that's good. Do we have some additional questions before we move on?
A lot of them are asking specifically about the age of their child and that they're not on any lists yet, and should they go ahead and get started? And the answer is yes. The
answer is yes. The answer is yes. I have to tell you a quick story. It's kind of cute. One time, years and years ago, I lived in Wisconsin, and a big thing in Wisconsin, a big thing is Green Bay, right? And so doing, financial services and things like that, I found it interesting that, so apparently it's a big deal to own Green Bay season tickets, like, to the football games. And so apparently when people die, like, so mom and dad had Green Bay season tickets, the siblings sue each other over them. I mean, it's like really serious, but it's so serious in Green Bay that when a child is born, people put their kid's name on the list for the ability to be able to purchase Green Bay tickets. And if they put their name on the list when they're born, the kid might come up and be eligible to buy these Green Bay tickets when they're 50 or 60 years old. So the good news is in Texas, it's not quite that bad. And so again, as soon as you know about it, put your kids on the list. And the thing is you never know. Like we have families that we work with that their kids weren't disabled, but then there was an accident and now they are. And so in that example, where you go ahead, because you don't have to prove disability when you put your child on the list, and you only have to prove disability and eligibility when they come up on the list, it doesn't hurt you or cost you to put family members on the list at any time. So I do recommend that.
Another question was, could VR do a second testing? If they were tested at age 14 or something, can they request another assessment? And how young can they do testing for IQ?
So I don't know the answer on how young. The first one that my own daughter had, she was 3 years old. She was barely 3 years old was the first time that she had it. So I know that they can do it pretty young. A lot of this testing and the neuropsych testing and all, there's, Woodcock Johnson, there's the WISC, there's the Wexler, there's all these different tests out there that these professionals use. The general rule of thumb on that is they don't want duplicate testing within a 3-year period, like to try to skew the results. But if it's been a few years, or if you've had significant changes health-wise or things like that, then I would get it done again. And just, not that we're talking about transitioning today, but from a transition perspective, If you've got a child that's transitioning to the community college or the university or any of these other places, I would suggest, if it's been a while since you've had testing done, to get it done, because if they are going to go to higher education and they need accommodations, your 504 or your IEP in the public school system does not transfer to the university. And most universities want testing that has been done in the last 3 to 5 years. In order to get accommodations, they want testing that has been done in the last 3 to 5 years. Now, one good thing that came out of COVID was that they have relaxed this a little bit, because they know how hard it has been for families to get testing. The wait lists have been long, and so some schools have relaxed some of their testing. And I've also seen some schools that took old testing, they accepted old testing results, and along with a letter accompanied by a physician indicating that the disability hadn't changed, that the accommodations are still necessary as such, and please accept that. And so I've definitely seen schools do that. But just so you know, every school is different in how they work with families. Every school has an Office of Disability. It could be called Disability Services. It could be the Office of Disability, ODS. But all of the schools do it differently. So you want to plan early, get your testing done early, and find out what the requirements are for any school you might be thinking about. Additional questions, Jan?
No, we're good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we kind of hit on this a little bit. We'll spend a little bit of time with this. How do I get started with special needs planning? So one thing I always say is you want to work with a special needs planner to help you formulate a plan. Your situation is specialized and you need a specialist, okay? So when it comes to what are the differences between a special needs planner and a regular financial planner, and some things are the same, like some of the licenses and certifications that we have are similar as far as the licenses are concerned. But I think where the difference is a special needs planner is really nuanced in all things special needs, about having money in the right buckets, so that way you don't disqualify your loved one from any state or federal benefits that they may qualify for. For instance, we are a National Social Security advisor, so we're really able to help families plan as it relates to SSI and SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare, all of those types of things. But the bottom line is kind of like, I use the analogy, if you had a heart problem, if your heart was racing, you're not going to go see a podiatrist. You're not even going to go see your PCP. You're going to go see a cardiologist. And when it comes to planning for special needs, it's a big deal. And the reason it's a big deal, and I mentioned this earlier, is as families, we could spend 25 to 35 years in retirement. This is a really long time. Most people have to save all of their careers to be able to retire between Social Security and what they've squirreled away all of those years. They're going to need that in their retirement. But when we have a child, in some cases, in some families, there's more than one child in the household with a disability that might need care for the rest of their life. We're looking like a third retirement. So husband and wife, that's 1 and 2. A child that's going to need care for the rest of their life, that's the third bucket, okay? So it's really important. The sooner you get started planning, the better. And there's no shame here. There's no looking back. I hear people say all the time, oh gosh, I would be embarrassed for you to know what I haven't done, or I've been planning to do this, but I haven't got around to it. And if that's you, it's okay. You're here today, and we're glad you're here. But when you get started, with special needs planning, you got to gather all the necessary planning documents. When it comes to planning, these are all things that you already have in place. You may or may not have in place. Wills, special needs trust, any legal documents, all your financial statements. These are investment accounts, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, 401ks, 403bs, old pensions. Anything that you have in place through work as far as benefits is concerned. You might have life insurance, you might have health insurance, you might have long-term care, you could have long-term and short-term disability through your work, and you could have any number of those things that I just mentioned outside of your employer. Those are the planning documents. Another piece of the planning document is downloading your Social Security statement. Used to be that we got our Social Security statements in the mail, and that stopped happening like I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, a long time ago, it stopped happening. So if you haven't noticed, there you have it. You can go to the Social Security website, ssa.gov, and you can create an account. And it may ask you to verify a credit card. It's not weird. It's totally legit. They just want to make sure that they're not giving your personal information out to somebody else. And you can download your Social Security statement right from that website. It's an important thing to do because if you have a disabled adult child whose disability started prior to age 22, your Social Security statement, Dad's Social Security statement matters as it relates to benefits that they may be eligible for in the future. Okay. So we also want you to develop a letter of intent. We do have a webinar on this on our YouTube channel as well. I call this a family love letter to other family members, your caregiver, mom, dad, caregivers for this loved one. What if something happens to you? What if you're incapacitated? What if you pass away? Who knows what you know? This letter of intent, we have a template for this that's form fillable. It's pretty awesome. It's very long. It's about 20 pages long, but this is everything about your child. Where were they born? What schools have they attended? Who are their physicians? What are their primary diagnoses, secondary diagnoses? What are their meds? What are they allergic to? What makes them tick? What makes them melt down? What are their religious preferences? What's the blood type? Basically, a day in the life of your loved one is what this is. And this is an important document to have because what I would say is I've actually seen even in people's own family, if we have a caregiver at home that works with the child, and then we have the other parent working outside of the home, sometimes the daily rundown of everything to the nth degree is not even known by the other parent. So anyway, get this done, put this on your radar that this is something that you want to do. And also, I would say let somebody know you did it. So if you have a successor caregiver, a successor guardian, or things like that on your radar, of course you want to let your spouse know, but who would step into your shoes, you want them to know that this letter of intent exists. You could share it with them now, or you could let them know where to find it if something happens to you. Okay, so we also want you to think about your vision of how you hope things will look for your special needs child. But I think here what we always miss is how do you hope things will look, and what is your vision for your future and your retirement? Because retirement for people that have an individual with disabilities that is going to need care for the rest of their life looks a little bit different because it's not the average. Everybody gets out of the house and they're really gone by 22, and if really late 24 or 26, but there has to be balance. So, as you're, pre-retirees going into retirement, looking at what that balance, that respite, so you have some balance and some of your vision of your future and your retirement, how you hoped it will be, is there. And it's not just what we're looking at for our special needs kids, because as parents, we're always putting our kids and everybody else ahead of our own. And after a while, you won't be as viable and as helpful as you used to be because your own health will fail. So there's got to be balance with that as well. Jan, how are we on questions?
We're doing good. So
okay,
we don't
perfect.
have any more.
I'm sorry?
We don't have any more.
Okay, perfect. All right. So how will your child's care be funded? So clearly, your child's care is not going to be singularly funded by SSI and Medicaid or RSDI and Medicare, but it is a component of funding. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to preserve this eligibility for state and federally funded programs. So we're talking about SSI and Social Security. So a couple of things, if you've heard us before, I say this almost every one of our presentations because it's a concept that is hard for everybody to understand because the Social Security Administration throws around all these little acronyms and names, and they sound similar, but they're exactly not. And so anyway, so SSI and Medicaid. So what you need to know about that, this does matter when your child turns 18. So a lot of families, their child is disabled, but they've never qualified for SSI all along the way because basically they were ineligible because the family had too much assets, okay? So SSI and Medicaid is a means-based program. It has to do with how much assets you have. Okay, so currently, if you're married, if you have more than $3,000 assets to your name, you don't qualify. You can have 3,000 assets, one house and one car. So if you have more than one house or more than one car or more than $3,000, any one of those, you don't qualify. When your child is under age 18, it's based off of you. It's based off of your assets, not the child. Okay, so I've had people call me very upset that they can't believe that their disabled child was denied. Are you kidding me? Of course he's disabled. I can't believe they denied him. But they just simply denied it because it's based off of the parent's assets. And as a result, it's not that the child isn't disabled. It's just as a result from a means-based test, they do not qualify. So right now, the SSI amount is $794 a month, and along with SSI comes Medicaid. And so what you need to know is that when your child turns 18, even though they still live with you, you still claim them on your taxes or what have you, you do want to go ahead and apply for SSI and Medicaid when they turn 18. You can call your local Social Security office. I would call 3 months prior to them turning 18, and you can schedule your appointment for the actual month that they turn 18. It doesn't have to be after their birthday. It has to be the month of. So in the example, if we had somebody that's birthday is today, September 24th, then anytime during the month of September, they could have that appointment. So, or after. Okay, so that's SSI and Medicaid. So Social Security is also known, so Social Security Disability, SSDI, it's all in the same. So I have people that say, my kid gets Social Security, and they don't, they actually get SSI. So Social Security is a workers-based program. You actually pay into Social Security. So when we're talking about retirement, you turn on Social Security in your retirement. If you become disabled as a parent in your working years, you turn on Social Security Disability. You pay into this system. Most of our kids haven't paid into this system, so this is not a benefit that they're eligible for. So when you apply for SSI and Medicaid, they go ahead and apply for SSDI and Medicare at the same time. Usually what happens is the letter you get first is that you're denied for SSDI and Medicare. And then again, people are very upset by that, but you actually should get denied for that if your child doesn't have any working quarters. The SSI letter comes later, but the SSDI letter doesn't tell you that, so you just feel overwhelmed. So just know that. And then so basically for Social Security, I talked about this disabled adult child, okay? So if your child's disability started prior to age 22, they have a feature with the Social Security Administration where your child can be considered a disabled adult child under a parent's record. They call it childhood disability benefits now. So disabled adult child is what they've called it forever and ever, and some people still use it. They also use the term DAC, but also childhood disability benefits. So basically, if your child's disability started prior to age 22, your child, when you turn on Social Security, which means you've either retired and turned it on, or you've become disabled and turned it on, your child, your disabled adult child, is entitled to 50% of your Social Security benefit. So in the example that your Social Security benefit is $3,000, your child would get $1,500. Yours isn't reduced, but they would get $1,500 under the RSDI component. And then after 2 years, then they would be eligible for Medicare as well. So this is a mouthful. We actually have whole entire presentations on this exact topic. So if this is, convoluted and confusing, I apologize for that. But I just wanted to give you some, the biggest takeaway that I want you to take away from this one right here is that even if you were denied, if your child was denied before for SSI and Medicaid, you should reapply when they turn 18. And the key thing for them, so $3,000 if you're married, one house, one car, $2,000 if you're single, one house, one car. So if your child has more than $2,000 in their name, it's a no-no. That money, if there's more than $2,000 in your child's name, it needs to go to an ABLE account. We have entire presentations on the ABLE account. That is an allowable account for an individual with a disability that does not count against them for SSI and Medicaid purposes, or the money needs to be in a special needs trust. And so again, we have topics on that.
Another question. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Do you
Sure.
apply for Medicare separate from SSI? Is it two different applications?
Say that one more time, please.
Do you apply for Medicare separate from SSI? Is it two different applications?
So SSI and Medicaid, it goes hand in hand, it's together. And then when it comes to Social Security disability and Medicare is, you're eligible for Medicare. You automatically become eligible for Medicare after 2 years of Social Security disability, but SSI and Medicaid go together. So if you qualify for SSI, you're going to get Medicaid, basically how it works. So the bottom line is, and this is one of the things that, that we can do, a lot of families don't know what is the future care cost, how much do we need to plan for as far as the future care for our loved one. And so we actually do, very tailored special needs cost care consideration and can come up with the exact number of what those future care costs look like. So while some people, can be affluent and they can fund their special needs trust with current assets, maybe they have affluent family members that fund the trust. A lot of people fund the special needs trust, which is going to pay for care for the future of your loved one. A lot of people fund that through life insurance proceeds. So they do what they've always done. They pay for things out of current income and current assets. And then upon their death, their life insurance, the beneficiary in the life insurance is the special needs trust. So that is another way to go about funding future care for your loved ones. Another thing that a service that we provide is a complete Social Security analysis. We actually have specialized software that really tells you how and when and what to file under the status of the disabled adult child. And it also takes into consideration any spouses that may have not worked outside of the home, but might be drawing off of the spouse's record. So there are some real strategic steps that a person should take because of this disabled adult child status of when and how to claim. And our software really puts it down even to the month and year, and it can actually show you the cost of waiting or the cost of taking it early. And it's not as simple as saying, well, you should just wait till you're 70. It's not that simple because there's all these different factors of who worked and how many quarters are paid in and all of those different things. So that may be something that might be important as you're planning and, and considering your options for Social Security. Do we have some additional questions?
Yes, what's the recommendation for when a child turns 18 to have that child declared a dependent?
Okay, so again, I know I keep telling you to go to our YouTube channel, and I'm going to put that up there on the screen in just a minute. So guardianship. So guardianship actually can be applied for 6 months prior to the child turning 18. And the general rule of thumb, so in Texas, we have a supported decision-making agreement. There's healthcare power of attorney, supported decision-making. There's guardianship. There's partial guardianship as well. But the general rule of thumb is if the child's IQ is 70 or below, the general rule of thumb is that they might not have the capacity to understand what they were signing if they signed a healthcare power of attorney and a power of attorney. So most attorneys will not let a person sign off on a POA or healthcare POA if their IQ is below 70. So that's a good idea. So if your child's IQ is below 70, that's a pretty good possibility. It's not a possibility. It is definitive that you need to have, a conversation with a special needs attorney to talk about the different options that you have available to you, partial guardianship, et cetera, the supported decision making. Guardianship does not have to be permanent. It could be temporary. So we see a lot of kids that maybe aren't there yet. Maybe they're immature for their age. We're still hopeful and optimistic. Maybe they're high functioning, but from a maturity level, maybe they're 2 to 4 years behind. So sometimes we see partial guardianship for that or guardianship, and we also see that they can get their rights restored. So 6 months in advance on that, and you're going to want to work with a specialized attorney on that. So there's a difference between a special needs attorney and a special needs planner. And a lot of times the families think that we do what the attorney does, and they think that the attorney does what we do. And the truth is, we work very closely together. So the attorneys, there's a paper, they're your legal documents. They're setting up the trust, the guardianship, the supported decision-making agreement, healthcare power of attorney and power of attorney. We're the money. So you can have a special needs trust, but if it's not funded, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. So we work hand in hand with that, and we make referrals all the time on that. So we've talked about a lot of things, and we've hit on a lot of them, but these are some of the things that should be on your radar as you're thinking, as you're transitioning, as you're considering, the future and kind of where you are, where you need to be, where you need to go. These are all things that need to be on your radar. They're all important, and we have YouTubes on all of this, and we'll be happy to, talk, one-on-one, if a family has, a unique situation that they need help with. But one thing that I want to say that trips people up on a pretty regular basis is that one on the bottom corner of directing child support to a first-party special needs trust. In the state of Texas, a lot of people, if you don't, I'm sorry, but a lot of people that have gone through a divorce have child support that is going to continue beyond the child's 18th birthday. And if that is the case, it will be construed as income for the child as it relates to SSI, and it can make your child not qualify for SSI. Sometimes it takes the Social Security Administration a long time to catch up with you, and then they might come back to you and you say that you owe them 7 years of payments that they've been paying you. So if you have child support that is going to continue after your child turns 18, you need to get that child support directed to a first-party special needs trust. You do need to work with an attorney. You do need a court order to direct it to a first-party special needs trust. And as long as that child support is going into a first-party special needs trust, then it will not be counted against your child for SSI and Medicaid. But that is super important, and a lot of people actually don't know that. So I just wanted to make sure to make a point of talking about that. We're running out of time. So here is our contact information. I work on a team. I have an awesome team here at Consolidated Planning Group, and we work collaboratively together. So if there's been some things that we've talked about you need help with, reach out. We always have a free personalized consultation. We really strive to have a better understanding of your situation and kind of where you are, where you've been, the steps that you've taken so far. We are a holistic planning firm, so it's kind of all encompassing. We really talk about we do a lot of listening about what's important, and really talk about creating this roadmap of here's where we are, and here's where you need to go, and here's the steps that you need to take you there. So we can definitely help with all of that. And if you've felt you've had a hard time navigating some of this, we can definitely help with all of that. So there's our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And having said that, Jan, we're almost out of time, but I would love to answer any last questions that we have before we go.
Okay, just a couple. So if the child has autism, does the child automatically get approved for Medicaid regardless of the income?
No. So that's a good question. There are a lot of presumptive disabilities out there, like Down syndrome is one of them, cerebral palsy is another. The word is presumptive disability conditions. It's a condition that they automatically assume a person is disabled if they have that particular condition. So you can Google those and look at that. And then I think we do have a presentation on that lists some of them. But the big one, the deaf and blind, ALS is one of them. Down syndrome is another one. CP is another one. So not necessarily, but we definitely see them getting approved.
And another question is, how do they get a template or a copy of the template for the letter of intent?
So they can reach out. We share that with anybody that has a personalized consultation, and we're happy to share that for sure. That it's actually a good one. You can create it. I didn't say this on there. You can certainly create one on a Word document or a PDF, but we are happy to share ours. And I think the form fillable format of it is a little bit easier, but I would say if you're creating a letter of intent, don't do it in handwriting, because we definitely suggest that you revisit your letter of intent, once or twice a year to come back to it and update it as things have changed. But definitely reach out. You can email and request that.
Okay, and then just thank you for the information. So no more questions.
Absolutely. Well, it has been a pleasure being with you guys today and sharing this information. I'm pretty passionate about all of this because, you know, what I would say is, you know, I do this. I do this for a living, but I live it. I live it personally and professionally. And as we were transitioning, as we were going through these things, it's crazy how difficult it is, or how all of the resources are not in one place and trying to find it. But what I will tell you, and I just want to encourage you, there is a ton of resources out there. There are a lot of people that want to help. We want to help. Your schools want to help. They've got a ton of resources at their fingertips. And if you were taking notes, and I mentioned Vocational Rehab, Texas Workforce Commission, Texas Workforce Solution, PREET, talk to your school liaisons on that, because they definitely have resources for you out there about that. So thanks so much, everyone. I got 1 o'clock. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and I look forward to being back with you again soon. Take care now.
Thank you so much, Allison. Clearly outstanding. Lots of great information.
Well, thank you. Have a good one, ladies.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye now.